Hello, I am David Suitsman. This is my fourth self-directed inquiry for IBHL2. Um, my line of inquiry is explore how Danticat. Sorry, let me move the camera a bit. Explore how Danticat demonstrates the ways in which we consider our identities during uncertain times of crisis, especially in tandem with nature and forces we can't control in her short story, Children of the Sea. This is through vlog, obviously, as you could gather. So the first thing I want to address with this is how Danticat, because this will primarily focus on, at least what's more touching to me is primarily on Kristoff's story, although we'll touch on Sophie and all that, but I think it's important first to show how she demonstrates like the scale of the ocean, right? Its magnitude. Right on page 5, we see Kristoff say that I can't tell exactly how far we are from there. We might be barely out of our own shores. There are no borderlines on sea, right? The line itself, there are no borderlines on sea, I think is really pertinent, because especially for a lot of Haitian conflicts, specifically in her other short story, 1937, we see the stark contrast between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, right? And what's most important about those, the distinction is the border, is that they're an island cut in half, and Haiti has the worse half, gastronomically, ecologically speaking. But the idea that there are no borderlines at sea, it's just the whole thing looks like one, as he says. It speaks to a level of it's a force of nature. Obviously, it's a force of nature. It's the ocean, but it really contrasts itself with Haiti, and so it's like crossing the river like crossing the river Styx into unknown territory, or when Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings crosses over farther than he ever was from the Shire. I believe it was Sam. Might have been Frodo. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but so I think it's really important to understand that as Kristoff kind of forges this new identity, he is in a completely different environment, in an almost otherworldly space that almost consumes him. It reminded me personally of the work of Lovecraft, with that Lovecraftian madness that he's known to write, when you understand something that is incomprehensible to understand. It drives you mad because now you're just in a world where things are much simpler, right, on a three-dimensional plane. It's not quite the same as that, obviously, but I see the similarities with you're being consumed by this thing, or it's consuming you mentally, because it's all you're seeing all around you, the water, the ocean, and then you look at the people and they smell like fish. They're in the sun 24/7, and you start to prefer the water, right? He sees the water as heaven at some point, and he redefines himself and his identity of who he is in tandem with the water, with that version of nature, because he's stuck on the water. It's almost like Stockholm Syndrome, except the water is personified as Agwe. I think that's really interesting. Let me go to a page where that's better, right? When he re-identifies himself with the water, he he starts to question, was I born to be, was I born to go into this water, right? On page 24, he says, I go to them now as it was always meant to be, as though the very day that my mother birthed me, she had chosen me to live life eternal among the children of the deep blue sea. Those who have escaped the chains of slavery to form a world beneath the heavens and the blood-drenched earth where you live. Perhaps I was chosen from the beginning of time to live there with Agwe at the bottom of the sea. Maybe this is why I dreamed of the starfish and the mermaids having the Catholic Mass under the sea. Maybe this was my invitation to go. In any case, I know that my memory of you will live even there as I too become a child of the sea. Right? The recurring theme and motif of motherhood and childbirth is in the story is used again when he starts reconsidering his identity as someone who belongs with the sea, as someone who is a child of the sea, as a way to say that he has fully redefined himself from birth, from the beginning. He has retconned his existence to revolve around the sea, revolve around the ocean, right? Earlier in the story, there was something similar to this. Oh, he says, when the boat starts leaking and they have to throw their stuff away, he says, we might all have to strip down the way we were born to keep ourselves from drowning, right? As he goes on this kind of identity shift, he doesn't really see himself as drowning necessarily. He just sees himself as going to heaven, as not necessarily in a way of dying, but just going back home, going to the real home. As Christians believe, heaven is home, and although Christians might not want to die, I myself am a Christian. I could say this from personal experience. When maybe even if a Christian doesn't want to die, they can still talk like, oh, I can't wait to go to heaven. I can't wait to see heaven, right? Even though death and heaven are sequential, they're not the same thing, right? He no longer sees the water as the way he's going to drown or the way he's going to die, but just as him going home, and that he is home, and that he was always meant to be here, right? Again, that Lovecraftian madness, that kind of Stockholm syndrome, right? He is stripping himself of the way he is born, his identity, right, to be within the flow of nature. But what's interesting about that, forging your identity within the flow of nature or against it, is, right, on page 23, Celian jumping into the water, or Celian, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, Celian jumping into the water after her baby, right? To me, to an extent, she has forged her identity around family, right? When she lost her family in Haiti, Swiss, her baby, was her only family left. That's why she held on to the stillborn child for so long, and then when she cast it into the water, the baby being a literal child of the sea, born on the sea, she goes in too after it, because her identity revolves around that baby, and so she goes to that same heaven, right? She goes home. She goes home where her family is. That's Swiss. She follows Swiss at the bottom of the sea. Reminds me, kind of a random thought, but it reminds me of how whales mourn for a few months, if especially mother whales, if their baby dies. And I like whales. But with that, she forges her identity in tandem with nature, right? So does Kristoff at the end of the story, right? They both accept the water as not death, but just home. And so drowning isn't drowning as in it's not dying. It's just returning to Agwe, returning to heaven, returning to Mass. But the old man who was smoking a pipe, I believe, he, strangely enough, forges an identity outside of nature, outside of the water, and I would say in spite of it, in defiance of the water, of the situation he's in, right? Sorry, I keep saying right. My fault. On the last paragraph of page 23, the old man asks Kristoff, the old man asks Kristoff to write his name in Kristoff's book, and he says his full name, Christoph says, it is Justin, Moise, Andre, Nosius, Joseph, Frank, Osnak, Maximilian. He says it all with such an air that you would think him a king, right? In this grandeur of nature, in this heavenly body, as it's personified by Christoph, Justin forges an identity against it as if he was a king, as if he retains his personhood. He doesn't strip himself of his birth, right? Christoph adopts a title as he accepts the water. He strips off the way he was born, as he said earlier. He strips off his name. He's just another child of the sea, not Christoph of Haiti, a child of the sea. But Justin, I believe, during the same entry where Christoph accepts the water, Justin says his full name as proudly as if he were the king of whatever place he was on, of whatever land he's in. And ironically, he's not even on solid ground. He's not on any land. There are no borders in the ocean. He is a person defining himself in contrast to the water, not in tandem with it. And this is also seen earlier in the book. I really hope I marked it, but at some point, the passengers on the boat, at some point here it is. On some point, the passengers of the boat, Christoph says, there are a lot of Protestants on this boat. A lot of them see themselves as Job or the children of Israel. I think some of them are hoping something will plunge down from the sky and part the sea for us. They say the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. I have never been given very much. What is there to take away, right? A lot of why they start thinking that, or the tone I get from it, is that they're trying to find a way to make themselves special, or to make themselves the main character of whatever's happening to them, give them a sense of control, right? Through their religion, they are these biblical characters, and they're gonna survive, right? They're the children of Israel, not the children of the sea. They're Job, not a mermaid giving mass underwater. Which I think is really interesting. I wrote down in my annotations, trying to believe you're special in the hopelessness / expanse of nature, right? It's that lack of power. The power dynamic has shifted, right? The Haitian people lost power in Haiti because of the Macoutes, and now they lost power with nature, with themselves, because they're stranded on a boat. After that passage I just read, it shifts to Sophie's perspective, and she says, if only I could kill. If I knew some good Wanga magic, I would wipe them off the face of the earth. A group of students got... Sorry, my air conditioner started. Hope that didn't scare you. A group of students got shot in front of Fort Demanchi in prison today. I'm going to speak a little louder so you can hear. I didn't know that would turn on. It's that contrast of power. It's the stripping away of power, right? When the people on the boat are stripped of power in the helplessness of nature and the water and the ocean, they want to imagine themselves as main characters who can escape it. And when Sophie is stripped of her power, both in her family dynamic, which we'll get to later, and in her country, she wishes she knew some magic of her culture, I would assume, in order to fight back, to have that power against it, as if they all need something mystical to fight back. But I feel like, to an extent, they are accepting the truth of their identity, at least at this point, that they are powerless, which is why they hope, or which is why they try to make themselves believe that they're special, because their identity is forged by their lack of power, or the power they perceive themselves to have, like with Justin, with the really long name. But speaking of Sophie and her family dynamic, I think it's really interesting with her father, right? Right here, she says, he is trying to protect us. He cannot protect us. Only God can protect us. The soldiers can come and do with us what they want. That makes Papa feel weak, she says. He gets angry when he feels weak. Why should he be angry with me? I am not one of the pigs with the machine guns. Right? in a way, because of the lack of power he has, the lack of control he has in his environment, in his country, because of the Makuts, he takes that power out on his daughter, on his family, on his wife. Excuse me. And he lashes out in anger in the same way that Sophie does, wanting to have that Wanga magic. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of the conflicts and crises of identity and personhood and ideas of the self are construed and conflicted and questioned, all because of the Makut takeover of the Haitian government. All of the conflicts of the story I forgot the word. Center around that conflict, revolve around that conflict. That was the word. I'm sorry. And yeah, I think that's really interesting. I believe there was, at this later on in the story, another example of her father taking his anger out on her. When she says, sorry, I have to try and find it. While we were eating tonight, I told Papa that I love you. I don't know if it will make a difference. I just want him to know that I have loved somebody in my life. In case something happens to one of us, I think he should know this about me, that I have loved someone besides only my mother and father in my life. I know you would understand. You are the one for large, noble gestures. I just wanted him to know that I was capable of loving somebody. He looked me straight in the eye and said nothing to me. I love you until my hair shivers at the thought of anything happening to you. Papa just turned his face away like he was rejecting my very birth. Right? The idea of birth happens again, right? This is the page after Kristoff says, we all might have to strip down the way we were born to keep ourselves from drowning, right? Her identity as a lover, as a partner to Kristoff, as a part of her identity, not her whole identity, but as a part of it, is being put into question by her father, because his identity as a provider, as a man, as someone who is strong enough to protect his family, since that is being questioned, he is taking that anger out on her, making her question her identity, whether he was rejecting her very birth. Because in that way she is saying that she was born, maybe not born a romantic necessarily, but born to be with Kristoff. So rejecting that part of herself, rejecting that part of her personhood that wants to be with Kristoff, that loves Kristoff, if that is rejected, her birth is being rejected, her identity is being rejected, her personhood is being rejected. And that begs the question, are we born with our identity? Are we born to be children of the sea? Are we born into a country's struggle? Is the environment always going to be our identity? Is that always going to be who we are, right? It reminds me a lot of Macbeth and the argument of free will. If my identity is shaped by the environment, to what degree is my identity predetermined depending on the environment I was born in, right? If I'm born in Haiti, am I destined to be a child of the sea? If I'm born in America, am I destined to shop at Walmart for the rest of my life? Who knows? And I think I really enjoyed that question. I really think it's really interesting, because instead of necessarily asking the question, is there or is there not free will, which to me, I don't know if this says something negative about me, but I've never really pondered that, and I've never really cared to ponder that, because I'm pretty content with myself as who I am with a person and what my identity is. I explore that in my written reflection of Eulogy, self-directed inquiry, as you may have seen already. Speaking of which, real quick, Kristoff throwing away his notebook reminded me a lot of Eulogy, as if, but instead of Alexei holding on to the tape and holding on to that, Kristoff throws it away. He doesn't define who he is, not learning his mother's language or whatever, but he didn't have that burden of needing to learn it. That's just what he was raised with. But anyways, back to what I was saying. I think it's since I am so fluent with myself as a person, I've never really thought of free will as an interesting question, since whether God always had me to be this way and was always going to die this way no matter what happened to me, or I have chosen to be this way, either way I'd still be the way I am, I feel. So I don't feel the push and pull to argue for one side or against. But I think that the question posed in Danticat's work with whether our identity is given to us when we're born because of our environment is a lot more interesting, because it doesn't just beg, was I born X? It was I born X because I was born in Y, right? I wrote this in my annotations next to the line, I am more comfortable now with the idea of dying, not that I have completely accepted it, but I know that it might happen. Don't be mistaken, I do not want to be a martyr. I know I am no good to anybody dead, but if that's what's coming, I know I cannot just scream at it and tell it to go away, right? That is him before Kristoff has fully accepted being a child of the sea, and so we see that even though he's still not comfortable being a martyr, he's fully comfortable with dying, right? He doesn't need to go put a label as a youth rebel or a radio show host or a martyr. He's a child of the sea. That's all that matters. That's what he was born to be, right? And I wrote next to it, nature influences perspective, and perspective influences identity. Then, where he was born in Haiti, struggling government, struggling agriculture, struggling infrastructure, even struggling in war, struggling in culture, etc., etc., etc. That influences his perspective on the world, what he sees Haiti as, and what he will inevitably see the ocean as home compared to Haiti, because it's unified. There's no division in the water. It is just sea. It's a force of nature, which is part of the reason why I feel he's becomes so in tandem with it and forges his identity with it, because his perspective is that this is more home than a divided nation, than a divided state. And so that the nature of the ocean influences his perspective of who he is as a person and what Haiti is as a country, which manifests itself in his identity as a child of the sea. And I think that is a really, really interesting concept. I think Macbeth didn't tackle... I don't think Macbeth, even though Macbeth, it has so much to do with war and kings and queens and fighting and political tyranny, and it takes place majoritively in Scotland or in that area, if I recall. And yet Scotland and even Ireland have had such troubling history all throughout time, since they were, at their inception. Even the Celtics were in Rome, or modern day Spain, for a while. A lot of history there. How did that influence Macbeth's identity? Because we don't really get a lot of characterization for Macbeth before he hears the prophecy from the three witches, from the three weird sisters. And I feel like that's kind of a shame. It would have been, I feel, a lot more compelling to see the hero as a hero, his noble and pure traits, and then have those really well developed, and then have those kind of shift as his perspective shifts and he redefines his identity. But yeah. And one more thing with the Sound and Fury quote. If we are born to be children of the sea, if we are born to shop at Walmart for the rest of our lives, whatever that is, does that not make the rest of our lives Sound and Fury? Right? Does considering life a destination make life not worth living? And I think that's an interesting question to propose, that if Kristoff were real, or if Céline were real, I would ask. Actually, I probably wouldn't ask, because I can't speak Haitian, or whatever the language is. I don't know. I'm sorry. But I think it's an interesting question, because with the way Danticat proposes that question, it's in tandem with nature. So do you have to be in that environment to have that personhood defined for you? So, I think it's interesting. I like the book, and that really concludes my thoughts on the matter and with my line of inquiry. So yeah, bye-bye.